Good day. This is Jason Moreno. I am a senior security solutions consultant with Quest Software, and today's recording is covering the Quest On Demand Security Guardian Tier 0 objects. In this video, we'll be discussing this top panel here of certifying and uncertified Tier 0 objects, how you would end up assessing those, as well as making sure you set up governance around this in terms of being notified by Security Guardian when new Tier 0 objects are detected in the latest scan. Sometimes people are adding new domain controllers or have created new privileged service accounts. And this product is going to pick up on that and make sure your organization is dealing with that addition in a healthy way, making sure you have the visibility to not allow it to become or fall prey to attacks by cleaning up hygiene issues once a Tier 0 object is entered into your environment. But let's start from the top. You're going to see this on your initial dashboard is a grouping of Tier 0 objects for on-prem Active Directory. And if you look, I have a couple of servers in here. I have group policies. Now you might be thinking, well, what is a group policy that might be affected by as a Tier 0 object? And I'm going to cover that, but it's basically anything that affects Tier 0 objects within Active Directory. It could be domain admins group, could be the domain controllers groups, could be at the very root of your group policy forest, which you'll see here, default domain policy, things like that, default domain controller policy. Then we're going to be covering also groups. There's all kinds of groups that Active Directory, when installed, are privileged groups. As soon as you add an object into it, those objects get privileges that other objects like domain users do not. And lastly, users that we find that might have privilege. They might be using their primary account. Your organization is still using primary accounts to, say, manage privileged objects. All in all, that's not a good practice, but it does give that visibility when I see people's account names in here that there might be some privilege accounts that people are logging in as. This one might be a privileged service account. So Mr. Torres or Ms. Torres is logging in with their regular Torres 1 account, and they use their Torres 2 account as their privileged account to do only work on privileged Tier 0 member servers, service accounts, things like that. All right, let's go in. I'm going to drill down. I'm going to go to view all, and all this is going to do is take me to the tab over here that says Tier 0 objects. I like to always point out that in every section of this product, there is a user guide. So all you have to do is come up here, click on the eye in the circle, and that will open your user guide. And I'm going to start by going out to the user guide and showing you some of the information that you're probably already asking yourself. How does Quest Software's Security Guardian identify Tier 0 objects? And so you will see right here, there are default objects, and the ones that we get are sourced from Microsoft. We didn't just come up with it. It isn't an arbitrary listing of things that we feel are Tier 0 objects. This is how Microsoft identifies Tier 0 objects. Matter of fact, I even have out on their own blog space direct control of enterprise identities in the environment. Tier 0 we're talking about. Tier 0 includes accounts, groups, and other assets that have direct or indirect administrative control over Active Directory forest, domains, domain controllers, and all assets in it. The security sensitivity of all Tier 0 assets is equivalent as they are all effectively in control of each other, right? So any Tier 0 object can take privilege away from or add privileges to other Tier 0 objects, which is awfully dangerous, right? That's why a product like Security Guardian is here to help you eliminate some of the hygiene issues. And so we have some defaults that we have already created when we do our initial scan. There will be some that we're going to talk about, and I'm going to scroll down here. You'll see this in the guide. that you're probably going to want to add manually as tier 0. So you can manually add objects. And as I promised, I will be going back to an example from one of the other previous recordings for findings. So I'll cover that momentarily, but let's just look at some of the examples of items you might want to include as your tier 0 objects that you're going to manually add. You might still have SCCM around. Well, if SCCM can affect a domain controller or has a service account that has power over users' accounts, I'm probably going to want to add anything dealing with that SCCM environment into my tier 0 objects to discover. The same goes for products that you might have from Quest. So I might as well take a moment here to say if you have GPO admin, active administrator, if the service accounts that we're using require privilege, and I could say for both they do, you're probably going to want to add them. And I can say off the top of my head, GPO admin, you can use GMSA, but if I'm using GMSA, what is GMSA account? It's a privileged account. So though we might have ways of hardening the product's capability of that service account being a GMSA account, making it harder to be victim to pass the hash, it does not mean that it's still not a tier 0 object because it has control over other things. Customers, I still talk to customers with Active Directory Federation. You might also have privileged account management systems. If you do have PAM, you're definitely going to want to make sure those accounts or systems that run that software are considered tier 0. Certificate authorities and subordinates, definitely. I would, if you're running our Quest Recovery Manager or anything taking, anything, and I mean any of your backup servers that are backing up Active Directory, in any way, shape, or form, have privileged accounts that run those types of services, you're definitely going to want to make them a tier 0 object, and you're going to enter those manually. We're not looking for these because not everyone has these different things. And Microsoft themselves did not certify these as tier 0 because they might not be. If I've taken out SCCM and I don't have a service account anymore, I shouldn't necessarily be looking for SCCM accounts. And then you can see over here, SQL, anything with Exchange, if the default permissions are still configured. There is a hardening guide that Microsoft has out that you can harden it, but I still would argue, I believe the service account that mainly runs doing password synchronization, I would still classify as a potential tier 0 object in my environment. I wouldn't want it to be taken over, even if it is hardened by a GMSA. So these are decisions you're going to make within your environment. So definitely have that discussion with your team when you're deciding on, well, it didn't pick it up, but I did get a finding that said that it's potentially an unusual account. And you're going to find that in our products. And a good example is the MSOL account for Active Directory synchronization of password hashes. It is not an administrator, but it has the privilege to basically steal the hash from everybody's account, move it up into Azure, so that when people log in, they have a single sign-on experience. Well, I'm still going to take that MSOL account and make that into a tier 0 object. So that was the example I was going to talk about. We'll be able to go back to it. And there's also computers running privileged accounts. Any account that has the ability of having higher privileges running on them, even as service accounts, I would definitely certify as possibly tier 0 objects. Once again, it is a discussion. It doesn't always mean that it can be a bad hygiene thing. They're necessary. However, different organizations do look at classifying other manual tier 0 objects differently, and that is open for discussion. Let's take a look back here. So this is the unfiltered view, and you're going to see in several columns here, this is the display name. This is the principal name, the distinguished name. It helps me find these objects. This is unfiltered, so you're going to see group policies, users, computers all in here. The days that it was entered, so you could see when I did my first scan, they're all here. And what was it added by? Well, I or somebody in my organization added this machine to tier 0. It's an app server. So it's probably running something in my environment. So this is an example of what I would see if, say, a user decided to classify something as tier 0 in the environment. And that could be discussed, once again, with your group. But that's how we go ahead and filter through it. And you can tab down here, go to different pages. What I'm going to tell you to do is filter. It's the easiest way. So let's do this by computers. So object type, right? So I'm going to come here, go to object type, and I'm going to say computers and let this filter through. So there's a couple of computers in here. One was added by a user. One was picked up in the process. So I can check this and then say certify it's tier 0. And I'm going to do that. What is this doing? I know it's a DC. I know it controls my environment. But now that it's a certified object, I can actually now say, I don't want it to be tier 0. Maybe I've downgraded it, or I've taken, if it's this box here, this other app server, maybe I've taken the application, I've gone ahead and retired it, taken it out of production. I might want to uncertify it. But in this example, now that I have certified it, and I'm basically telling the product itself, Security Guardian, hey, yes, I see you scanned and identified a domain controller. I agree with you. This is a domain controller. This is a tier 0 object we need to have analyzed during your regular security assessments looking for vulnerable attacks. And so we're going to either look at TTPs or the types of attacks that we're picking up in your environment live, or hygiene events around that device, in this case, a domain controller. So let me take you over here to enabling protection. So this is the part of the product that my customers really need to understand the benefit of. If I enable protection on a tier 0 object, what are we doing under the hood? Well, Change Auditor is the agent running on your domain controllers. So we are an LSAS watching process on your domain controllers. So when we enable protection, all we're doing is telling Change Auditor that another privileged object, remember we were just on that explanation of tier 0, another privileged object should not have an ability to change this object with their normal privileged account. Could be a user, could be some other process or service that's certified. And when I protect it, I am telling Change Auditor, if you see some type of privilege change going to happen, some change to this domain controller by a privileged account, I am going to tell you to drop that request and give that account, that person, that system running the pop-up on it that says that it's denied. And we're doing that in memory. So we're not changing anything about the object in your environment, but when we put a protection template in place, or put the protection in place for this object, it stops me from logging in using my account and doing anything privileged against this domain controller. And just off the top of my head, what could I do? Well, I could do a lot, but specifically I think of demoting it. If I ran the script for PowerShell and said, let's demote this DC, take it out of service, say it was a destructive action like that. Shouldn't this be discussed? Shouldn't this be something that the rest of the group during a change window should be notified about if this was my intention? So that's what this is essentially doing, is it's looking at other privileged accounts. So you might be saying, well, I got a backup solution. It's got a privileged account. It's not only backing up Active Directory on this DC, but it's doing other things that need system privilege, taking snapshots or telling the VSS service, hey, I need a snapshot to back up. What do I do about that? You're telling me it won't work. Well, you're going to set exceptions for services that do need continuous access on an ongoing basis. So I can enable protection, but also put in break glass accounts to allow services, other processes running in my environment to continue to work against those. So this is important to understand that attackers are going to try lateral movement, privilege in your environment through whatever means, missing patches, software vulnerabilities that they're aware of, and they're going to look for over permission accounts. And once they have that privilege, once they can laterally move and move up to a higher privileged account, they might be going after these types of machines or other user accounts. So let's go back out to my findings. So I'm going to say users, and we're just going to now get the privileged view. The administrator. I shouldn't really have the administrator account being used by anybody ever. Built-in administrator. It has special powers in your environment, especially for authoritative restores. But specifically, this is another account I might want to enable protection on. I do not want somebody, since this account shouldn't be used, to use a privileged account to make any changes against the built-in administrator account, no matter if I've renamed it or not. Now, let's take you through other processes of deciding what you're going to do through this actual process of cleaning up. This is a great way of reducing tier zero, talking through who needs privileged service accounts, who doesn't. Is there anybody here that their account has been disabled, but still had been left into a privileged status? They had privilege at one point. Cleaning these up will help your organization make decisions around getting rid of that technical debt that unfortunately allows attackers to take advantage of your environment. I meant to go to tier zero objects just so we can move back out to this main screen over. Let's go to dashboard. So as I add them, you're going to notice this is going to start changing, right? So at the beginning, it was like one object. It was 1%. So I've added a couple, but I have 67 uncertified objects. So you're definitely going to want to continue going through. You can do it right here. I could say, you know what, let's take a look at default domain controllers, group policy. I can decide, you know what, even from here, I can send out an email and say, hey guys, folks, I want to talk about this during the next one. Let's go ahead and start thinking about putting protection templates. But in the certification process, I can actually see the details of that group policy. Why is it tier zero? Because it's affecting DCs in my environment. So this is very helpful in helping analyze what your next steps are in taking care of and cleaning up tier zero objects. How do I fix it? Well, you're going to probably want to reduce your attack surface. So I'm going to certify it, and then I'm probably going to protect it. And that would stop anybody from using their privilege account to make changes against a tier zero object. This is a hardening process, having this in our environments. So I have covered everything here in the tier zero process. You're going to systematically go through with your team. You're going to add in tier zero objects so that our product looks at these tier zero objects differently. The last thing that I want to cover, and it does not happen directly here, is the ability that I might want to add a tier zero object from Active Directory. So remember that list where I said, hey, you might want to pull your Exchange server in here, your certificate server, because you're doing certificate management on site. Well, I can just start to put the name of that object, and then I can say, you know what, I want to certify this, not only add it, but I can add it here as a tier zero object, and then I can put an actual protection template on it so that other privilege accounts can't make arbitrary changes against the MSOL account. which is a really good thing to do, actual MSOL account. This would be the same process, rinse, wash, repeat for all of those other objects that we're not going to pull in by default, but your team is going to decide, yes, we're running privileged account on there. I want to make sure that that machine, user object, service account, whatever it is, group policy, is being guarded and protected against changes by certifying it as tier 0 and then enabling protection. Well, I want to thank you for joining me today.